If we're gonna talk about supports messing up hero shooters, you gotta start with Overwatch. Day 1, 2016, the game was like, play whoever you want, no rules. And what did people do with that freedom? Immediately abuse it. Every lobby looked like a charity match. No healers, just 6 people locking in damage or DPS, whatever you want to call them, and nobody wanted to heal. Because yeah, who signs up to be the team's designated nurse while everyone else is out there having fun? Blizzard saw all this kerfuffle going on, and first they tried the soft approach. They threw in a looking for group feature, which helped about as much as a flashlight in broad daylight. Eventually they had enough and slammed down roll queue in 2019. 2 DPS, 2 tanks, 2 supports, end of discussion. It was basically Blizzard's way of saying, you guys can't be trusted to not ruin your own games, so here's your babysitter. Support players were over the moon. They were like, thank you, sir. We appreciate it. How could we ever thank you? So it was a good compromise. Granted, queue times went up the ass, but something had to be sacrificed. Now, before we continue, I want to ask, what's the most broken comp or character you remember completely ruining a game? Drop it in the comments, and if you've got a story or even a clip, join the Discord. Links in the description. We hang out there, shoot the shit, and I'll be pulling some of your best stories to feature in future videos, with credit, of course. So if you're interested, check that out. But the irony is, even when supports were being played, they could break the game just as hard. Take the Moth meta, for example. Blizzard reworked Mercy, and she instantly became like the Luna of Overwatch. If you didn't have a Mercy, you might as well not even play. She was in every match and every comp. Variety, dead. Fun, questionable. Blizzard eventually nerfed her back into something more manageable, but the damage was done. Supports had shown they could choke the meta all by themselves. And then came the real shit show. GOATs. 3 tanks, 3 supports, 0 DPS. That's right, a hero shooter with literally no damage characters in the meta. Pro games turned into 15-minute staring contests where Bridget, Moira, and Lucio just held everything together with infinite sustain. Watching it was like watching 2 sumo wrestlers try to hug each other to death. Everyone hated it. Everyone said it was killing the game, and Blizzard kept throwing band-aid nerfs until they finally gave up and said, fine, roll lock forever. And GOATs died overnight. So right out of the gate, Overwatch showed both extremes. Nobody playing healers and the game falls apart, or too many healers and the game turns into trench warfare. That cycle of supports either being ignored or running the entire show is exactly what every other hero shooter has had to deal with since. Then Blizzard decided to shake things up with Overwatch 2. And the big thing here was dropping teams from 6v6 to 5v5. It sounds like a small change on paper, just one less tank, but in practice it flipped the whole ecosystem. Suddenly there's only one meat shield standing between your supports and a Genji giving you backshots. And even with one tank, they can't babysit 2 healers 24/7. So what resulted was that support players were miserable at launch. Everyone was diving them non-stop, and if your tank blinked out of existence for 2 seconds, you might as well have turned off your monitor. A lot of people straight up stopped playing support, because why would you sign up to be target practice? So lobbies were emptier, and Blizzard was staring down the same old problem. Nobody wants to heal. So what do? Well, they start appeasing. Now, history has proven that appeasement can just make things worse. That's how we got to World War II. So what happened was that every support got a new self-heal passive, so you auto-regenerate health when you're not taking damage, which is basically Blizzard trying to bribe people to play healer by making them tankier for free. And honestly, it worked. Support felt playable again. But here's where things swung the other way. Once people adjusted, supports weren't just surviving, they were thriving. In 5v5, Blizzard themselves admitted supports were the most impactful role. Matches dragged on forever because healing sustain was off the charts. To fix that, they had to start cutting healing across the board and buffing the DPS passive so they could actually, kill things. And then you look at the support kits. Baptiste throws out an immortality field, Ana has a grenade that cancels more dreams than student debt, Kiriko teleports across the map and has a "your team is invincible now" button. I mean, at this point, these aren't even healers, they're fucking super nurses. Of course, the community didn't like this. Support mains were happy they could actually survive without wanting to uninstall, but everybody else, they were crashing out over how busted these kits felt. So the pendulum swings again. At the start of Overwatch 2, supports felt underpowered and ignored. A few patches later, they're suddenly the most influential role in the game, and everyone's complaining about how overpowered they are. Blizzard's been stuck in this eternal loop of nerfing healing, tweaking role passives, and reworking kits, all in an effort to try to keep the game from turning into another GOAT situation. Now, while Overwatch was busy inventing new ways for supports to either ruin or save the game, Paladins was quietly creating its own mess. The problem here wasn't that nobody wanted to heal, it was the opposite. Healing was so strong that people started stacking 2 supports just to get an advantage. Hi-Rez tried to balance this with something called Cauterize, which is basically an item that you had to buy as a damage character in order to even get a kill. At first it felt like a clever counterpick system, but it didn't take long before the entire game was balanced around it. Healing without Cauterize? Way too strong. Healing against maxed out Cauterize? Practically worthless. So the whole role just turned into a binary switch, either busted or useless depending on something you literally had to buy, which is a rant for another day. As you can imagine, people hated it. Supports complained that they were just heal bots who got completely invalidated once anti-heal stacked up. Damage argued that without Cauterize, double support comps were basically unkillable. It was the same cycle as Overwatch. Eventually, the devs admitted that Cauterize was a band-aid that had become a tumor. In the Season 5 update, they took it out of the shop and baked anti-heal directly in the game, which is what they should have done in the first place. Now, the basic attacks automatically reduced healing by a little, and it ramps up as the match goes on. Which meant early in the game supports can actually matter, but later in the game sustain drops off and fights don't last until next Tuesday. It was Hi-Rez basically saying, okay, fine, we'll handle anti-heal for you since you can't stop whining about it. So Paladins show the other half of the problem. Overwatch had to force people to play healers, Paladins had to stop people from abusing them. And in both cases, supports dictated everything. By the time Rivals showed up, this whole support dilemma was already baked into the DNA of hero shooters. And sure enough, Rivals walked straight into the same problems. Just like Overwatch's early days, nobody wanted to play them. Every ranked lobby turned into a staring contest where the team with a healer had a massive advantage, and the team without one was basically free LP. People were already talking about a role queue because the games felt doomed the moment you were picking characters. But here's the ironic part. Not even a year later, supports weren't just viable, they were the meta. People started stacking triple supports, and it was the GOAT situation all over again. So the devs kind of panicked, and the first thing they did was chop down support ults. And if you guys remember how absolutely oppressive and redundant Cloak and Dagger's ult was back in the earlier seasons, yeah, that shit was needed. Another thing they did was crank up damage and started handing out anti-heal. But the pendulum didn't stop swinging. By Season 2, support mains were miserable all over again. Characters like Spider-Man and Black Panther were just giving them non-stop backshots. Not even like solo backshots, they were tag teaming, you get the idea. And so as a result of this, Strategists just straight up quit the role. Not to mention Necros just shitting on them as well. He didn't help. It was actually kind of sad that everybody just decided, we're gonna go on strike, but that's the world today, I guess. But to be objective, they did kind of have a point. Even the devs admitted that their performance rating system punished supports harder than anyone else. So NetEase also went full Overwatch 2 mode. Juiced up support damage, gave them way more ways to fight back, and tweaked the ranking system so it didn't feel like pulling teeth. Then came Season 3 and 3.5, and you already know what happened if you're watching this video. Triple support crawled back into the meta, this time carried by ISIS and Al-Qaeda themselves, Luna and Loki. Luna's ult stretched into eternity, Loki's utility turned every push into a hostage situation, and if they had a third healer, good grief. The devs, they tried to fix it, they put in more nerfs, they put in Blade with anti-heal just to stop the problem, and they fiddled with team-up abilities to calm things down. Did it work? Not really, I didn't notice any difference, it was just a problem that they had to set up a whole different season to solve. And fortunately, in Season 4, they did nerf Luna. So far, I haven't heard too many complaints about it, but it's still early days, so I'm not going to give them any credit yet. So that's the cycle in a nutshell. Rivals is basically the awkward child of Overwatch and Paladins. It took Overwatch's no one wants to heal problem, Paladins healing is either busted or useless problem, and mashed them together. Supports either feel ignored and weak, or they stack up and choke the game until it's unbearable. The community plays their usual roles, support mains crying about being underappreciated, DPS mains crying about how they can't kill anything, and tank mains just asking for a second tank. The thing is, Rivals is still new. It doesn't have to repeat the same mistakes. If NetEase actually wants to avoid another Luna Loki nightmare, they've got to be real about it. First off, role systems can't just be lock 2 healers. Overwatch nuked goats with 2-2-2 role lock, but it also nuked half their variety. Rivals doesn't need something that extreme, but stacking strategists infinitely isn't gonna fly either. A soft cap works. Let teams run 2 strategists, fine. But if you bring in a third, tone down the healing. You can still do it, it just isn't as busted. Second, anti-heal can't be a gimmick. Paladins learned this with Cauterize, and Rivals is already heading down the same road. Blade showing up in 3.5 as the anti-heal guy is fine as a band-aid, but anti-heal should be baked into multiple kits and maybe even damage over time. Otherwise, it's either nothing dies because Luna exists, or everyone dies instantly because Blade exists. Third, supports can't just be heal bots or impenetrable. Season 2, they were dive fodder. Season 3, they were mini gods when stacked. The fix isn't rocket science, just make them fun and impactful on their own without turning the 3 of them into a nightmare. Give them mobility, give them survivability, but stop handing out abilities that break the pacing and make fights unbearable. So are supports ruining hero shooters? Not really. They're just the clearest proof of how badly the devs are handling balance. When they're weak, no one wants to play. When they're strong, nothing dies. The real issue is devs swinging the pendulum so hard that it just slams into the opposite wall every patch. Overwatch showed us what happens when healers are scarce. Paladins showed us what happens when anti-heal is lazy. And Rivals is living proof that the lessons didn't stick. It launched with nobody wanting to heal, spiraled into triple support hell, flipped into supports being bullied, and then right back into Luna and Loki breaking the game. This cycle isn't new, as we've learned. It's just louder now. Supports aren't killing hero shooters, devs who overcorrect every season are. Until someone finally finds that middle ground, we're all just waiting for the next supports are ruining the game thread to pop up. And judging by the last decade, that wait won't be too long. Alright, so that's gonna wrap up today's video, ladies and schmentlemen. I just wanted to take a look at how other games like Rivals handled supports, and if there's a pattern of them being overtuned and what that did to the meta. If you played Overwatch back in the GOATS days, let me know what that was like for you. And for Paladins players, I'm curious what it actually felt like having to buy Cauterize. That shit sounds insane. Also, quick plug, I've got that Discord for the channel, links in the description. We hang out there, shoot the shit, and I'm starting a series where you guys send me your worst gaming experiences. I'll turn them into weekly videos and, of course, give credit. So if you want to be part of that, hop in. Alright, so thanks a ton for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.